This audio file comes from the L'Abri Ideas Library at www.labri-ideas-library.org. The library contains over 1,000 lectures and discussions which explore questions about the reality and relevance of Christianity. We ask you to respect the copyright for this audio file which belongs to L'Abri Fellowship. The file is for personal use to share with friends, family and colleagues, but please do not publish the material in any format or post it on a website without seeking permission from L'Abri Fellowship. Please note that views expressed in the lecture and discussion time do not necessarily represent the views of L'Abri Fellowship. This lecture is a continuation of the previous lecture in the series.
You may have your Thanksgiving offering. Do it one day. If you're very thankful, do it the second day. If you're very, very thankful, do it the first day. But never do it the fourth day because it's the stench in my nose, says the Lord my God. It's very interesting that God says, I don't hate it if you do it long. Because there is a place for the settler. I made you, and I'll put it in New Testament terms, Christ never came in order to make us Christians. That's too small, that's too little. Christ didn't come to make us Christians. Christ came in order to make us human. And the human includes the bed where we lay with our wives. The human includes the little things, the thinking about mathematical problems. It includes the food that we eat. It includes the room we're living in. It includes the music we listen to. Well, it's all art, life, all these things, they belong there. That's what Christ came for, to make it new, healthy, to make it possible. Grace and truth, that's what Christ came to bring, if you read just in John 1. Grace and truth. Well, that's life. Life is the reality. And I think these are the things that the Reformation was about. This is what the Reformation was thinking about. It was a big battle to fight against, at the same time, this new humanistic thinking. Humanistic because God was in a way out of the picture. Yes, it's nature and grace, and all Renaissance art, almost without any exception, is church art. Just go to the museum, you see all these Madonnas and Pietà, and Michelangelo never did anything else with making church art. But nevertheless, it's humanistic, because it's nature and grace. They have the little bow for the church, and then they all do their own thing. You see, that's what it really means. So if people ask you what Christian art is, never say this is Pietà by Michelangelo, because that's the worst example that you can find. But we go on. Out of the mentality, and interestingly, it's not the philosophy that's first, it's the art that's first. It is Alberti, it's Masaccio. It is the Renaissance artists who were defining the new way of looking at the world. And how long? 2 centuries? More than 2 centuries later, it's Descartes who goes on, picks it up again, and the philosophers follow. And Descartes says, man is autonomous. There are some, you see, Alberti has already said it. You see, it's like this. There you stand as man, and you have your eyes, and there are the light beams coming to your eye, and they stuck it like this, and then you try to portray what's outside, and you do that with perspective. But perspective is a new way of seeing. And it is a way of seeing which is completely unparticipated, in this sense that the things have no meaning except sending out light beams. That's the only sense they have. And Descartes went through and he said, how do I know that I am? Because I think. Well, because I'm autonomous. Because I'm a thinking being. Autonomous. And there's an outside world that is related to his inside world, and that's an autonomous nature. And in that nature you have eternal laws. And when Descartes began to talk about eternal laws, everybody in his time, without exception, everybody said, Descartes, you're crazy. Eternal laws don't exist. They were wiser than people today. The eternal laws are 2 and 2 is 4. Have you ever heard that argument in a discussion? Yes, but after all, 2 and 2 is 4. That means it doesn't matter what you believe, the world is the same. These are the eternal laws. Do know that you're quoting Descartes. He was the first man to say this. Exactly with this example, 2 and 2 is 4. And I think it's the most erroneous, mistaken example you can imagine, because it's an autonomous nature, in which say there are no eternal laws. At this moment of history, 2 and 2 is 4 because God made it to be 2 and 2 is 4. And that's the meaning of it, that God made it to be like that. We say, thank you, Lord. And except when we are willing to say, thank you, Lord, we lose the meaning of it and it becomes something completely senseless. Out of Descartes comes Locke. And Locke goes on with this, and he has written a book that all of you, of course, read in the first class of the lower school, but I just want to remind you of that little book. It's called An Essay Concerning Human Understanding, published in 1689. Just 3 years ago there was a reprint, and of course you use a reprint, not the old book. An Essay Concerning Human Understanding. It's one of the basic things to understand where we stand today, because no philosophy book has been as influential as Locke's book. Everybody has read it, and everybody has accepted it, and we are filled with it. You see it when you look at television. You read it when you read in the papers. Every little textbook, till the first textbook you ever heard in school, was based on the principles of Locke. That's why it's not just a little joke, but I mean something true when I say Locke is for the first thing that you've ever read in your life. And Locke says somewhere that God has furnished us with natural and surer means to arrive at the knowledge than revelation. And revelation cannot be admitted against the clear evidence of reason. You see, reason is the right way to know things. I'm not going on to quote, but his idea is this, that we are there as a kind of box, and outside there are things, big X's. Reality is a big X. It's not like this, that you go out. Where were we going? Oh yes, we were going to Switzerland, by a little tram, and then we go out, and then the hotelier was coming and he was picking up my trunk. How do I know? There's nothing there. I don't know that this is a hotelier. What I see are just light beams reaching my eye. That's the only thing that's there. You see, and that's a big X. When I say hotelier, why do I say hotelier? Because I have made the idea of an hotelier. You see, I've picked up all these light beams, and in my mind I made the idea of the hotelier, the idea of a trunk, the idea of Switzerland, the idea of a tree, the idea of the hole in the universe when one of these trees was going. That's all my invention. Man becomes inflated, becomes very big. And reality becomes very thin. It's a big X outside. Participation is now completely gone. Bacon said the business of understanding reality should be done as if by machinery. That's the beginning of the 17th century. You're one of the first men to say, understanding should be done as if we are machines. That means don't bring in your humanity. The things got to be looked at objectively. That means that God made this world like a watch, and now we are going to look at the watch. But that means God is out of the question. Don't think about God. To be objective means don't care about God. Never to ask basic questions. They shouldn't be asked. We got to be neutral. And if there's anything that I have to fight, and I hope many people fight with me, it's the neutrality of science. Science is never neutral. We are subjective. We are personal. And we cannot be without that. But they, in the 18th century, that's our greatest enemy. And I hope that I want to make it clear that if you don't know that yet, that now begin to maybe to understand it a little bit, that our greatest enemy is the Renaissance Cartesian Lockean principle of looking at reality. It's neutral. That means no religion. Of course, every religion is our making. Very interestingly, the 18th century, when these things happened, Locke and so on, is exactly the age of pietism, of a great revival of Christianity. How can this be? And I think that these Christians made the greatest mistake in history. First, of course, they went back to the medieval mysticism. And then they said there's nature and grace. Well, let nature be nature. That is what Locke and his friends are thinking about if we have the grace. And so they were just passing by these things and let them go. And I think that's one of the basic mistakes that today in America, I'm only talking about America, not of Europe, because who cares about Europe? It's almost sunk in the ocean. But America, you see, you have many little colleges here that call themselves Christian, and they teach the same things that they teach anywhere else, but they have a little chapel. So it becomes nature plus chapel, you see. And that's Christian. But I think that's a mistaken thing, but it goes back to the 18th century, when the new thinking was coming, and we haven't thought enough how deeply unchristian this new way of thinking it is. Because 2 and 2 is not 4, it's not an eternal law. As soon as you said 2 and 2 is 4, that's an eternal law. You're talking Cartesian, and you lost your battle. And you don't know what reality is anymore. That it's loaded with meaning. Before this change, again the change that began with Mendinus, of course that's a metaphor, cutting into man, to Harvey, and then these changes that I was discussing, and how they are tied together is very difficult to understand. It's so difficult that altogether we really don't understand, but we know something very deep has happened. It means a complete change of thinking. Before that time, roughly speaking, because as I said, the Reformation just was a kind of holding back. I think that's my personal conviction, that the 17th century is the richest era in all history, and it's a fruit of the Reformation. And that's why, if you go to the museum, in every museum, every art museum in the world, there's a large section of 17th century art. Why? Because it's the greatest art. Of course, there is a prehistory to that, and we can go back to the Gothic, and in France, in the Gothic, there's something great, but the consummation of it is in the Baroque, the Roman Catholic Baroque, the Protestant things, the music of Bach, Schütz, Monteverdi, and so on. You see, these great things. It's Shakespeare. And it's many, many things more. Many, many things more. This is a great age, and people had a very, very deep sense of reality. I'm going back to that. I hope to show you some of the slides in some of these days. But just look at the 17th century's little still life, and you will understand. Why did he make it? Why comes out of Calvinism exactly the painting of still lives? Because that's the most Christian thing to do. Because it testifies that reality is loaded with meaning. These people have a deep grasp of meaning. You see, so this is a great time. But this time was killed now by the Renaissance, Harvey, Descartes, 18th century Enlightenment, Age of Reason. This whole view of reality was killed. Before that time, everybody looked at nature like this. You have the Supreme Being, and out of him comes the higher beings, angels and so on, and then man, animals, plants, and things. And things are just the lowest of low things. It's a kind of hierarchy. Of course, everybody knows the book of Lovejoy on the great chain of being, and if you don't know it yet, just put it on your list. You see? So, the great chain of being. You begin with God, and you end up with stuff. But after that, and that's the change I was talking about of Mr. Santorio, and we're all caught in it, because that's my message. These are not interesting things that happen outside of it, but we're part of it. It's us ourselves. If we talk about reality, if we talk about these big issues, we talk about ourselves. And we got to begin with ourselves. And if we want, the last word I'm going to say this morning is, we got to rediscover reality. That is, we got to try to get a grasp on it. So how does it go? That after that, it's like this, that the most real of all real things is the material. And then you get the whole hierarchy, the reverse. But something else happened, that if you have this God, angel, man, animal, plant, thing, then you can reverse it, because what they did was doing this, making it horizontal. And they said, look, see, in the beginning there were atoms, and then in the course of time you had life, plants, animals, and then out of a long evolution, a kind of mistaken animal grew, an ape without hair. It's called man. And this great was very strange, because he had anguish and despair, and he did the craziest thing of everything could have been done. He invented God. You see, so now you have put it horizontal. That's a great change. So instead of thinking like this, you think now like this. That's the evolution theory, which was not a little invention after some facts, but was the pre-stated before any investigation in the 18th century, because it's a theory which is a belief, and then science had to prove it, and they tried to prove it. But I discussed this view on reality. Man is an atom. Man is a kind of animal. But the strange thing is that if you reduce the reality to man, making him an atom, basically, in the ground of being, man is an atom. The result of a long evolution, a strange atom, an atom looking at his own navel. But nevertheless an atom. Or he is just like the rabbits. After all, what is the difference between man and a rabbit? You know, you take a rabbit, lady rabbit, another rabbit, gentleman rabbit, you bring them together, you go away for some time, you come back. What do you see? Many little rabbits, you know. Well, you take a lady and a gentleman, you bring them together, you go away for some time, and you come back. What do you see? More little human beings. What's the difference? Yes, the difference is that they went to marry, that they had a wedding, they had beautiful gowns, they had legal things laid down, they had the blessing. Oh boy, these are all the beautiful facades we made just to hide what is basically really there, and that is the rabbitness of man. You see, the rest is just little invention. You see, this is the way man began to talk, and man began to think. But the interesting thing is, and this is very basic, that man cannot be changed. Man is man. So man feels threatened when you say you are an atom, or you are a rabbit. Nobody says hooray. You see, the Bible says that the wisdom, knowledge will make us free. But this type of knowledge does not make us free, but makes us threatened. And that's in a way the history of modern philosophy. The threat of being only an atom. And that means being meaningless. You are meaningless. You are meaningless. So man is man. And he tries to fill up the gap. That's why you have the protest. And art, and that's the importance of art for everybody today, art is the means of protest. Art is just the place that people want to cry out two things. We are man! And we have lost our humanity. Both are the same. Go to the Modern Art Museum and you will see. You will see with your eyes what people are talking about when they talk about reality. They tell you man is dead. God is dead, of course, but man is dead. Reality is dead. There's nothing left. That's why you can make art in the greatest metaphor of all reality. How do we make a great work of art? Well, it's doing like this. I won't be the work of art for you at this moment. I go to the beach, take off my clothes, take a little bottle of Coke, walk in the water, throw on the Coke in the waves, walk on the beach, dry myself, reclothe myself. That was the work of art. You see? It's the act of throwing the Coke in the water. Because it doesn't mean anything. You see, it's just as fleeting. It's just as nothing. And you'll find this over and over again, but at the same time it's a process. It shouldn't be like that. Reality is more. It's a desperate call for meaning where there is no meaning. And this is why I think that it's very important for us not to laugh, nor to avoid modern art, but just to stand there and weep. And then to see that this loss of reality is not just there in the museum, not with these crazy guys, but with us. Of course, these people also try to change the world, make it meaningful. That's where the revolutions are today. It's not the technology which is the danger. The danger is a new way of looking at the world. I have a beautiful quote here by Susanna Lange, but just because of the time, I will leave it. Susanna Lange, I will read it in a few days. She says, we look in a new way at the world. It is not the facts, but it's our eyes that have changed. And we look at it as if facts are the real things. We look at it in a factual way. And factual means without meaning. These are the things strict without meaning. It's the things that are the material things. That is the most unhuman things outside of us. Completely neutral and objective, without the God. Without any God. Nevertheless, that human activity that is finding out the facts is the most important kind of revelation that we can have. We call it science. That's why science is the most important thing today. People revere sciences. And sciences are the source of revelation, the source of knowledge. Science has said, and everybody bows down, yeah, even if they heard before what is said. And so at this point, I should like to make a statement. Again, write this down and think about it for the next 25 years. And I'm serious. I've been trying to think about it for 25 years and I still don't understand it. It's very difficult, but it's basic. If you follow the methods and principles of modern science, the Bible is not true. If you follow the principles and methods of modern science, the Bible is not true. I remember that about 2 or 3 years ago in a discussion, we were discussing Genesis 1 and so on, I said, rather casually, not with such a great emphasis and so on, because now I'm a little bit more careful, but I said at that moment the Bible is true. 10 minutes later, some of my good friends said to me, but you said the Bible wasn't true. No, but I was saying that I really question the methods and principles of modern science. And the methods and principles of modern science are based exactly on these great problems that we're talking about. You must understand that not only the Bible is not true, but Homer is not true, Virgil is not true, Shakespeare is not true, everything is not true, humanity is not true, we're all lies. According to the principles and methods of modern science, we're just a bunch of atoms, mistaken atoms, thinking that we are little gods. But we are less than atoms, we are just mistakes of the evolution. You see, we got to see these things and understand that this is all related. And this is what I tried to teach this morning. That these all things belong together and that we should think about it. It's not easy. It's very, very complex. But what do we say if we say, I love the Lord my God with all my heart? What are the results of this new thinking? Because the things I'm talking about are not interesting. They are not interesting at all. They're either true or false. And if they are true, then they have results in the world around us. It's not just something that's interesting for a nice little debate. No, it's the life of the people themselves. So if today you find that people are not interested, students are not interested to study. Why? Because the things have lost their meaning. Life itself has become very thin. Bob Dylan wrote a beautiful song, sang a beautiful song. He called it Thin Man's Ballad. And he is protesting against a man who has become less than man. He says, you are absurd because you have lost your meaning. You are a nobody. You are a nobody. You are thin. We just look through you. And I think that this is a better understanding than many things. We will talk in this course also somewhere about permissiveness. Why can we see all these things happening? Why did the 17th century, with a very few little exceptions, never painted copulation? Even if in normal life, everyday's life, in Holland as well as in England, there were more than 100 words for that, sleeping together and so on, making love. We have very few words, and the words that you use are either very rough words or they are these Latin words that are kind of evasion, or you use words that are trying, well, how do you call that? There's a word going out of my head. A word which is very too soft, like sleeping together. Of course, you're not sleeping together, you see, if you sleep together. So, that type of thing. They had many, many words, and in normal life, Cats, C-A-T-S, that's a Dutch poet, and this Dutch poet and writer was the teacher of the Dutch Calvinists. His books were the bestsellers, and aside of the Bible, everybody was reading Cats. He has written one of the most beautiful books on marriage. And in the chapter that deals with the young marriage people, the just married, he said it's better not to, I don't know which word he uses, but not to copulate in public. So it could be done in the 17th century. Why did people never paint it? On the other hand, today, of course, these things can't be done. You cannot even talk about it, or just a little bit. But if you go to the movies, you can see everything. It's just thrown in your face. And they do it over and over and over again. And you cannot buy a book, or there are some pages where we go into the most intimate relationships of men and women. Why? Well, I would say because it's lost its meaning. It is just trying to shock you into meaning, but as soon as you shock you into meaning, meaning is gone again. And it is just because it has no meaning that we can do all these things. So it is the permissiveness is a result of this new meaninglessness, that things are not loaded with meaning anymore, that we are in a way rabbits. The world is our own making. You see all these rules that we had in the past. You know the rule for don't fornicate and so on. All these strange laws. Who invented them? Why do people take drugs? I think people take drugs on the scale they do just because reality is so thin. In a way, you want to have less of reality to be happy with the world. But you have a very small amount of reality then. And that's why you feel happy. It also means that there is no unity anymore within a country. Who cares about the American flag? Who cares about the nation? Very little bit. In Europe you see the same. Nations, all these royalties, they are going. When, let's say, my parents was young, it was the most natural thing in the world to love the Queen. Today people say, love the Queen? I never met her. You see? So, why? Because this unity has gone. There's more than just being people in the sense of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have changed everything into qualitativeness. But the quality of being Dutch, to revere the Queen, because she is the symbol of. But the symbol of is not just a little tag that I put on her. No, that is what she is. These things have really changed, and they're changing. The very interesting thing is that the change began, where was it? Very many centuries ago. And then you get Descartes, and you get the Enlightenment, and now these things are on the street, and they're everywhere. And you see the world falling down and tumbling down around us just because of that. These are the things we're talking about. Social equality, that's fine. What does social equality mean? I think there's a new understanding of it. It does not mean that we're all equal before the law, but it means that we should all be as stupid as somebody else is. You see, nobody should have more, and there's no participation. How do we find out today what humanity is? We make studies about rats. That means that we take just away what is the most human of man. You see, we say these rats react like this. That is how man is. Beautiful story in Custer. Arthur Custer wrote a book, and what was the name of it? I forgot. He talks about an American girl who becomes the mistress of a Russian cultural attaché in Paris. And so they go to bed. And they always go to bed in a certain way. He had certain habits. And then one day he talks about the investigations of a Russian scientist, Pavlov. And he compared man to rats. And he says, we have found that if you ring a certain bell and then you bring food, every time that you ring the bell, they will have the reaction about certain fluids beginning to move and so on. So, and he just touches the girl in the same way as he used to touch her, as if you just do this, then you will have your reactions. Well, the girl just jumped out of the bed and goes out of that house, and she never came back to that man. I think she understood something. You see, if we treat us as if we are rats, then we can better stop. Then it has no meaning anymore. Interesting that a man like Custer writes about it, although he's not a Christian. Very interesting. I want to read some. Yes, maybe I have 2 quotes here that I want to give. The first is out of a very important book by Peter Gay, published the last 10 years. This is out 1970 was this. The Enlightenment, an Interpretation. The Science of Freedom, it's called. The second tome. It's in 2 parts. I think everybody should read that book. It's very interesting. When I talked about the Enlightenment 10 years ago, everybody said, that's your interpretation. You're a Christian, and now you're just falsifying reality. This Peter Gay writes a book, The Enlightenment, The Rise of a Neo-Paganism. You see, he understands. And now you can say it because a thick book has been written on it. So, and he has a beautiful quote here, I just give it, about Diderot. Diderot, who was one of the most important 18th century people coming after Locke, precisely at the moment when the time for amity seemed to have come, the new philosophy threatened to render man's relation to nature problematical once again. 18th century thought had liberated man from his filial dependence on God and made him part of nature. But the philosophical anthropology of the philosophers, which promoted man from servitude, ironically enough demoted him at the same time from his position little lower than the angels to a position among the intelligent animals. While man seemed on the point of conquering his worldly domain through his critical intelligence, he was faced with a second expulsion from his terrestrial paradise, and this time the avenging angel was man himself. Beautiful how he phrases this. And this is exactly the predicament. Some of you are going to be pastors. That's exactly what you people in your congregation will wrestle with. What am I? Am I little more than the animals? Is there any reason to go out of the bed of somebody else, to stay out of the bed of somebody else? If it doesn't matter and everything is the same and if we are rats after all? You see, and we can of course quote the Bible, but the Bible quote itself may be tried to lose its meaning because nobody understands the frameworks anymore. A very interesting book was published a couple of years ago. Everybody should read this, certainly. Sears and Lord, 2 women, very interestingly, for the women read this book. It's edited by 2 women, Sears and Lord. I don't know their first names, I'm sorry. And it's called The Discontinuous Universe. The Discontinuous Universe. The book is only a book of quotes, long quotes, pages long quotes of very good writers. In the introduction they say this: in the absence of a God, unsponsored like the rest of their generation, they have spent their lives in the midst of the most terrible human possibilities without any real conviction that man can or even wishes to check himself before he destroys or maims the remaining life on his lone, already befouled planetary home. In the absence of God, that's how they began. The very first words of this book. All the writers here in this book agree that man must impose some kind of order on this reality which has no meaning. Modern literature conjectures a world of pure contingency. Reality is ambiguous, disturbingly, self-destructive. Around 1850, listen, around 1850, a division in human consciousness took place as the assumption that we lived in a coherent, ordered universe began to break down. And with it, the bourgeois values that has been dependent upon it. So if we have difficulty, not just with the young people, but if we have difficulty today, understand in other people, or let other people understand, or even ourselves to understand what is the meaning of these very, very deep laws that God gave, not as something extra. Everybody understood at the time when the law of Moses came that we shouldn't fornicate or steal or so on. It was natural to man to understand. He was just saying it once again with a kind of authority. But it was not an imposed authority because it was natural. But nowadays we feel that it comes from the outside. Yes, I got to stop again. What we were discussing is, and what we tried to discuss is that reality has gone. So what are the problems today? I just take a few minutes and then I quit. The problem today is that we have to rediscover, re-win reality itself. We have become thin man. Our reality is thin, of all of us. Just a little example. 2 days ago, here just in America, I was the guest of some people, and the woman said that she and some friend of hers had been to the movies with their children. It was a film which is now running also in Philadelphia, I guess, about this wilderness family. And she said, when she came home, that she was angry because of the silliness of that film, because of the simple lie of that film. But her friend couldn't understand her because it was simple entertainment. And who takes entertainment serious? You see? So she talked and talked, and he thought that she was angry with her. But she said, no, I'm not angry with you. I'm angry by the film. You see? And these are the things that we have to discuss and realize, that we can be angry about things because they do matter. And they are very important to fight for. The interesting thing is that the woman who did not understand why it was important to be angry about such a film, that woman had a young girl, her only daughter of 15, running home from home. But she never saw the connection. She never saw that the girl ran from home because there was no feeling for reality. One of the most beautiful stories in my own personal life is that at one of the conferences in America that I gave, there was a discussion time, and we talked about modern art, and somebody said in the audience, but why are you so emotional about it? What does it matter if the people make nice little forms and not meaningful pictures? And I said, but it does matter. Well, I was really forceful. And she came after this discussion time to me, and she wept. And she said, why are you so sharp on me? I'm saying the most obvious thing in the world. Well, we had a good talk. At this moment, this girl has been admitted to the Royal Academy in London and is painting, but it meant a complete change in her life, because for the first time she felt that life is worthwhile and that reality is real. You see, and I think it's important to fight for it. We cannot discard these things, it doesn't matter. But to do this is something that we got to win back, and we're all soft on it, all of us. To be a Christian doesn't mean to get out of the world, but to be a Christian means to get into the world, because it's God's gift to us. As Christians we say, thank you, Lord, that this world exists, and we go into it. We want to grasp more of it because it's so wonderful. Just like, and that's a trite example, but nevertheless a true example, if you have a good, nice meal and they offer you something very nice to eat, you say, can I have a second? But in a way, because you have to want more of it. Why? Because it's wonderful. You see, and in that sense we want to have more of reality. To be a Christian is not withdrawal out, but to go in. Of course, the Bible. And of course, the Bible is not only propositional facts. That's almost falling in the traps of modern world. The Bible teaches us a mentality, a way of living, an insight. It teaches us, it gives us a key to understand reality in order that we may see, because we know. You see, if we know that the world is loaded with meaning just because God made it, it opens the door and we begin to see that things just don't happen, but that they are loaded with meaning. Of course, Revelation speaks about this being loaded with meaning, but the whole Bible is full of it, every page of it, loaded with meaning. So what I would say is that the Bible is not giving an old, withered, past worldview, but that it is a worldview that is normative. It's not that we got to believe, if you are a Christian, that Christ has risen from the dead. Of course you got to believe that, otherwise you cannot be a Christian. But it's not that we should believe that Abraham has lived really in history. Of course we do believe that he lived really in history. But that's not the point. The point is not that we accept some facts, but that we follow a certain understanding. You see, God is teaching us, and the way to understand the world, that is what we've got to try to do. And that's very difficult, because it means that we got to think in new frameworks. We got to go into personal knowledge. Christ is truth. That kind of truth we got to go. Truth is not just something objective, factual, but truth is personal. And I just want to bring you down here and say, read this book of Polanyi about personal knowledge. It's a very important book. And the deep question again is, what is truth? What is truth? And then we got to say, this is the basic question, what is truth? Truth is not what Descartes said truth to be. Truth has nothing to do with facts. Truth has to do with reality. That's more than facts. It's loaded reality, meaningful reality. Because truth and reality and life and beauty and righteousness and love and freedom. They're all different things, and nevertheless they are related, and the one can never be without the other. They are one of the most difficult things, and I'm very often thinking about it, and I've never been able to really find out. I don't know whether I will ever be able to find out. I don't know whether ever man can find it out. It's so deep, it's so wide, but that's the core of reality, that God said, I give you truth and reality and life and beauty and righteousness and love and freedom, and all these things, they are not the same, but they are related, and the one can never be without the other. And that's the reality. And that's the truth that we're talking about. That truth is a truth that we also look for, not only in our sermons, but also in our scientific work. Because there shouldn't be a break between the sermon and scientific work. It's one. Last question. Just 2 minutes, and then I've talked my time full, and I didn't even give you an intermission. I'm sorry for that. I apologize. This is the basic last question. What is water? What is water? Water is the bad-smelling ditch. Water is the beautiful waterfall. Water is the rain that's just hitting your face when you're going someplace. Water is the rolling ocean. It's a little pond. The moon shining in the water. I can go on for 2 days like that. And of course poets have gone on in all of history to talk about water. And I think that they talk all of it to grasp something of that great mystery of God's creation, which is called water. One little bit of it. Everybody just grasps a little bit of it. It can be true. It can be false. It isn't said that when a poet has said something, it's true. There's some poets that tell you wrong things. But to grasp the meaning of water, that is what we have all been trying to do. Of course, scientists have been trying to do that too. Today there are some crazy people around, and they say that water is H2O. And that's the lie about water. I hope you have understood that by now. It's exactly 1 o'clock. Thank you very much.